Hello everyone, Norm Jones here, Brigham Young University, and in this video we are going to begin learning about how to use if statements, and we're going to start out with a really simple spreadsheet just to introduce the main structure of how you would set up an if statement, and then we'll follow that up with a little bit more complicated example in our next video. So what we have here are two values right here in cells B4 and B5. Let me center that there. And the context is the user would enter two numbers in these cells, and then when you click on the compare button, it's going to say either A is less than B, or A is greater than B, B is greater than A, or that they're equal. So, or excuse me, it'll say A is less than B, or A is greater than B, or A is equal to B. Those are the statements we're going to put there. And so this should be really simple. We'll go over to turn to the developer tab, turn on design mode, and double click on this button. And here we are in the Visual Basic Editor. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go up and type option explicit. As we learned in our section on variables, that we want to get in the habit of doing that every time we declare variables, so that we don't have any misspelling problems. And then we're going to declare a couple little variables. We're going to say dim A as, let's make it a double, and B as double. And so what we're going to do is we're going to read those two values into cells. And let me see, they're in cells B4 and B5. Excuse me, we're going to read them into variables. We're going to read the values from the cells into variables. So we're going to say A equals range B4, and B equals range B5. So these two assignment statements will take the contents of cells B4 and B5 and store those values in two variables named A and B. So from here on in our code we can just reference A and B directly, and we have a nice simple way to refer to these values. And so we're ready for our if statement. If A is less than B, then, and I'm going to tab over, and then by the way we're going to write the answer to cell B7. Okay, so let's go back here. So we're going to do a kind of a reversed assignment statement. We're going to say range B7 equals A is less than B. So that's the message we're going to put there. And again, we just, our first part of the if statement, we just have a simple conditional expression, A less than B. It's going to return either true or false. If it returns true, this particular line of code will be executed. Otherwise, we're going to now do an else if statement. Else if A is greater than B, then, and now I'm going to go up here, I'm going to select that line of code and paste that down. We're going to change this to B, excuse me, let's change it to A is greater than B. Okay, so an else if clause allows us to throw on yet another conditional expression. So what that means is, well, if the first conditional expression evaluated false, then let's try this one. And if that evaluates to true, then we'll execute this line of code. Otherwise, we got to keep trying. And so finally, we're just going to type else. Now, at this point, we could type else if A equal to B, but we don't need to, because logically, if A is not less than B and it's not greater than B, then the only remaining option is that it has to be equal to B. And so finally, that's the end of our conditions. There are no more conditions to test, and so we just type end if. Now, by the way, a couple things I want to point out here. You'll notice that for each of these parts of the if statement, I indented the line of code that was to be executed. Now, you don't necessarily have to do that. So, for example, I just selected those lines and I did Shift Tab, which moves everything back one indent. If you were to write the code like this, it would still work. And I see that a lot of times in students who are learning how to program. And even though it works in terms of giving you the right answer, it's really difficult to read. And it's confusing. And so you really should get in the habit of using the tab key, just to tab over that so that those are lined up. And by the way, another thing I want you to remember is it's quite possible to have multiple lines of code in each of these clauses. That happens a lot. And then it's even more important to have this indented so that you can clearly see what set of lines of code are associated with that particular clause. And so that's just a really important style thing that you need to get in the habit of doing. Okay, this should be working at this point. Let's go back to Excel and let's go exit design mode. And let's delete this first. So it says A is less than B. And now I'm going to type 31. A is greater than B. And then I'm going to type 30 here at this point, and it says A is equal to B. So there you have it. Now I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to put a little breakpoint right here, just so we can see exactly how this flow of execution works. And so I'm going to hit the F8 key, and it's going to step through the code one line at a time. So the first thing it's going to do, it's going to check A is less than B, and that is false. So it goes to the next line. Is A greater than B? That is false. So it goes here, and that's the only option left at this point. So it executes that line, goes to end if, and then end sub, and that's kind of how the flow of execution works as you go through an if statement.